Hey guys, this is the $100 million podcast. Our $100 million guest today is Jason. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Jason, I'm going to let you do the introduction. Who are you?
Yes, so I am Jason Umidi. I'm owner of Umidi Lifestyle Solutions, LLC, and I own a durable medical equipment store called Med Emporium. I have the privilege of serving those that are disabled, um, those that have mobility issues, the elderly, and their caregivers by providing a service that they need. Um, It's a wonderful business to be in. It's close to my heart because my daughter's disabled. But with 10,000 people turning 65 every day, that population is going to explode and double by 2030. So I believe I'm well positioned to be able to take care of the needs of this aging population that we're going to be experiencing.
That's super awesome. That's super awesome. Well, I want to hear a little bit about your journey. We'll go ahead and I'll let you start wherever you want to start, but I want to hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so my story is a little unique. Born in Salt Lake City in November 2nd, 1968, to a single mom. My mom was from a small town in Michigan, and the whole town had big hopes for her to make something out of her life. And when she showed up with a kid, um, let's just say it was quite embarrassing for my mom and her family. Single mom in the 60s wasn't looked at too kindly, but she met my dad while she was playing the lead role in a small production of The Fantastics, a musical where she had the lead role. And he had recently dropped out of law school. It being the 60s, they were searching for meaning for life. And they actually lived in a tent for a year in Vermont. And during this time, my dad was a caretaker on the farm, and they would take their produce and sell it in the markets. And they brought me one time, and here I am with long, curly blonde hair. And my mom made my clothes for me. So she would stitch her name on the clothes, which is Marie. Well, I got lost and they brought me to the police station and they're running ads on the radio. We have a small little girl here named Marie. And there wasn't anybody making calls. Oh, that's my kid. I'm so glad you found her. And it wasn't until I wet my pants that they went ahead and changed me. They said, oh, wait a second, correction. We have a little boy here who's been lost. And so, but that was typical of that time in our lives. Living in a tent and driving a Volkswagen bus was a little bit countercultural, but there was a lot of people doing it in those days. So eventually they said, well, we want to move north to Canada. We want to buy some land and just live off the land. Whatever that meant, disengage from the culture, but find some true uh, experiences that are authentic where we can just live out our mindset of what we believe in. But at the time, they didn't know what they believed in. They were practicing some Eastern religions. They were meditating. Well, on the ferry boat ride going from Maine to Nova Scotia, which is where they bought the land, a pastor came up to them and shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with them. And they had never heard this message. And it changed my dad's life. He went ahead and started a construction job and went to seminary at night to become a pastor. And he was a pastor of this small little church founded in 1825 that had a wood stove in the center of the church, kind of like a Little House on the Prairie. And that's where my formative years begin because I saw my dad take unpopular positions. He was a writer in the local newspaper, so he would write articles that revolved around faith and society and the school system, just writing from his spirit and his authentic journey of where he was in life. Um, but my dad also was a side hustle guy. So we we would buy Christmas trees and Christmas wreaths during the winter time, and we drive down to New Jersey where my dad's family lived, and we would sell Christmas trees in November and beginning of December to make that extra money because being a pastor is not that high end business kind of income. You know, a lot of times you have to have a side hustle. But we did that for a couple winters, and that really taught me that it's okay to have a side hustle. It's okay that if what you're doing in life is not quite cutting it, that you can have alternative ways of bringing in an income. And that was important for me because my first job in fourth grade was as a paper boy. And I would go home from school every day, load up my papers, go to my route. And I probably had a mile and a half to get to my route. And then I probably had 60 houses. So I would get home probably around dinner time. But this job taught me, A, the value of money, the value of customer service by, interacting with my customers, making sure the paper was dry and at their doorstep so that they could read it. And I got tips. So I bought my very first dirt bike, a Honda XR75, from my paper route money. And I've never not had a job since. Now, when we would go down to New Jersey to get the Christmas trees, well, I would stock up on the latest electronics, like the Sony Walkman and little tape players and cassette players and headphones and just little stuff that I could afford. And I'd bring them back to Canada and I'd sell them to my friends. So, those early days of being an entrepreneur were really taught to me by my dad. And it wasn't this overt, son, I'm going to teach you about being an entrepreneur. It was just really living through experience. And so I think personally, that's how I best learn is by experiencing. If it's not learning by what someone else is doing, it's learning on my own and kind of making my mistakes and learning from those mistakes. But we moved back to Canada, back to the U.S. when I was a senior in high school, and that was in 1985. I delivered pizzas at night during school. During the summer, I would have a daytime construction job working as a carpenter. I would build decks on the weekends as another side hustle. But during this period, I had a local photographer named George Cardis, who kind of discovered me as a model and took me to New York. So this was another side hustle that I just figured, you know what, let's try this. Let's see if we can't make some money. And I did New York, I did Europe. I didn't make a whole lot of money, but I did get my Screen Actors Guild union card because I started doing a lot of TV commercials. And it allowed me to save up some money. It allowed me to get health insurance. So, I enjoyed that industry. It was exciting. Getting on a film set is always exciting. But I learned that experience, that excitement that you get, don't confuse that with your identity and maybe what your giftings are. So I eventually realized, hey, I'm not going to make it and be famous. I'm not going to make a ton of money. Let's kind of circle back and take stock of where we're at and move on to the next phase in life. I'm a big believer on third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chances in life because I believe nowadays you don't have just one career and then you retire. I believe a lot of people end up trying different careers, some out of necessity, maybe one's not making enough money, but I've learned over time that it's okay to start something, and if it fails, start something else. And so I was recovering from my fourth spine fusion surgery. I was living at my parents', my wife and my young son, and I was on disability. So I was making like $1,800 a month. And, it was tempting to kind of throw in the towel and give up. But I had this idea, which was I'm going to start flipping houses. This was back in the 2000s when it was all the rage, and I had never done that before. I was broke, so I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, listen, can I borrow some money? And he said, yeah, I've got $5,000, it's yours. So I borrowed that $5,000 and I found a hard money lender and I gave him that $5,000. In exchange, he gave me $160,000 with a 10% interest only note. And I went and bought my first house. And I learned that early on when my contractor started doing things that I hadn't approved, I had to fire him. I learned I had to find someone else, and if that meant going to the local Home Depot and just hanging outside and looking for those guys that drove a truck that had tools and ask them, hey, can you work? Are you a carpenter? Can you come work on my property? So this first house was a pre-war home that someone had turned into a duplex, and I went ahead and restored it to its natural pre-war condition. And I paid off my hard money lender when I got a bank loan to refinance that note. And I took some equity out and borrowed money again. And I kind of did that 3 or 4 times with that hard money lender until the bank knew that I was a good investment for them, a good bet, so to speak. Um, but, that housing industry went through changes. And I kind of got stuck with too many properties. I was, over $1.5 million in value. I had some rental properties. And when the housing market changed and sort of crashed, I got caught. And so I tried to do some short sales, didn't work, ended up having to go through foreclosure, which was difficult and painful. But all that did was give me an opportunity to reinvent myself and find another opportunity to provide for my wife and kids. And so,
And are you talking about the 2008 crash?
yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And, I'll be honest, the banks probably had no right giving me as much money as they did. Kind of everybody was kind of caught up in the free money and the good appraisals we're getting in the market. And so had I been a little bit more prudent and not tried to bite off more than I could chew, maybe I wouldn't have been over leveraged and got caught. But, you learn from those mistakes. And, part of what I like to tell people is you got to pivot. When things change, you got to be creative. You got to be able to pivot quickly and keep that momentum going. And so, I went ahead and became a traveling project manager for a sign company. Again, this was something I had never done, but I answered an ad and got this job. And so my project management experience working in the housing industry as a investor and flipper and realtor or as a landlord, it gave me the experience and the qualities necessary to be very good at my job. But here's the problem. This job entailed me getting on a plane Monday morning and usually coming home on Fridays. So I was home on the weekends only. And that was hard on the family. It was hard for me to have any real local friendships, and it made it difficult to stay grounded in who I was. And so I found that, during these weeks on the road, that as an alcoholic, my drinking got worse and worse. And so even though it never got in the way of my job, because I was a functioning alcoholic and I did well at my job, it caused me to no longer dream, no longer think, what are the possibilities in this life? What else can I do that can be exciting and challenging and give me a sense of purpose? I numbed my emotions with pills and alcohol for a couple of decades. And I went through a bad divorce and custody hearing and got remarried and I almost lost that wife and kids. So when people say, well, do it as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Well, yeah, I may not have been physically hurting anybody, but it took a toll on my family. And so when I got sober on January 10th, 2017, it radically changed my life. Not overnight. I had to grind out my sobriety day in and day out, but I started to believe and to dream again. And that's what really set my life on the trajectory that I'm at now, where I own this business. Because, when I was drinking, all I cared about was me. It was always Jason. What does Jason want? How can I get Jason what he needs? When's my next drink? Who am I going to go out with tonight? And that's a very limited ideology when it's all about you. There wasn't any service going on in my life. I wasn't helping my fellow man. And so as a person of faith, I learned that we're to love our neighbors as ourselves. And that's a powerful calling, but you got to love. And so for me, this job of buying this Med Emporium durable medical equipment store was really an opportunity to give back to the community. Um, there's great rewards for service. And I didn't know that growing up. I didn't really realize that as a young adult because I was always trying to get what Jason wants. And so whether it was money, whether it was fame, whether it was look at what Jason's done. He's got all these properties and rental units. Um, that's an empty way of living. And so when I found purpose through my sobriety, it seemed like things started to slowly change. And now I've got another business, Lionheart Mobility, that we're looking to scale and franchise. And this opportunity is getting these small, lightweight, collapsible wheelchairs and scooters for those with disabilities and those that are elderly who can rent them short term, whether they want to go to Busch Gardens or they want to go to the football game and watch their grandson and they have mobility issues and they can't afford to buy a new one. We'll rent you one. We'll deliver it for free and we'll give you that opportunity to participate in life. And to be honest, what I've learned in this business is that you got to have a vision. You got to solve somebody's problem in order to be successful. And so participating in life is something we take for granted. But if you're elderly or if you're disabled, that's a very difficult place to be because a lot of people can't afford the lifestyle to support that disability. It takes a lot of resources. And I know as a parent to my disabled daughter that it's expensive. A lot of times you're having to use used equipment because you can't afford the new wheelchair or the new scooter or the leg braces. But I'm at a place in my life where that sense of purpose and that blessing that I get from serving someone who comes into my store who has an immediate need and I have an opportunity to solve that need, that's the best feeling ever. The success, the money, the scaling of the business, we hope to franchise the Med Emporium as well. All that stuff is going to take care of itself if you focus on your customer and what does your customer need. And so customer service, I've never worked in retail before, but once you're in it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that you have to serve your customers. You can't have all the best scooters and wheelchairs and the best business plan to sell people if you don't care about them as individuals. And so I think where I'm at now in my entrepreneurial journey, in my sober and spiritual journey, in my life with my wife and my kids, is I'm finally whole and complete. And that's an exciting place to be as an entrepreneur because the sky's the limit.
That is awesome. Oh my goodness. I love real estate, and I want to talk more about that. But I mean,
Yeah.
what a journey, and I love that. And I'm assuming you're a Christian.
Yep.
That's awesome. I
Well,
also very much love Jesus.
I tell you what, I had my journey. Being a preacher's kid, you inherit a set of beliefs growing up in the church that maybe you don't necessarily understand or even can own your own as you get older. You got to make your faith personal and you got to make it all about you. And so, when I started going through trauma as a young individual in elementary school, I went through some sexual abuse and that scarred me and it changed my life in a bad way, to be honest. I grew up with a lot of depression, a lot of self-loathing because I felt like I was dirty, that I made a mistake, that it was my fault. And I didn't really have an outlet to communicate these feelings with people. And so for me, what I learned was to bury the emotions, bury the memories. And when I got old enough to drink, it was one more drink will help me forget. And so I lived an incomplete life because I wasn't whole on the inside. And as a young adult, my faith wasn't my own, it was my parents' faith. And I hadn't really cultivated my own faith journey yet. So it's been a rough journey and a long journey, but to be able to be 57 and tell you and your listeners that I have zero regrets, that's life giving and life freeing. You know, without sobriety, I wouldn't have become a published author. I wouldn't be a recovery coach. I wouldn't be a life coach. I wouldn't be in a position to where I can walk with other people during their journey, whether it's an alcoholic, an addict, um, anybody with an addiction for that matter, because you're living a life that is shallow and is not whole. And personally, I believe Jesus will make your life whole, but it doesn't always happen all at once. And, you know, I have a complicated relationship with my Savior today at 57, even though life is the best it's ever been, it's still complicated. And so as I walk with other people during their journeys, um, I'm blessed to be able to learn from these people. I'm blessed to be able to partake of their journey and their healing. Um, and I'll be honest, as a person of faith, it was never taught at my church that you're to serve other people. It was always about, well, you got to live a certain lifestyle, you got to go to church, you got to tithe your income, you got to be you got to show up and have it all together. And life is messy, and it's in that messiness where we become authentic and real. And you know, I think you'd be surprised if I told you that there's a large population within the Christian community that struggle with addictions. And the biggest reason they do is because they're afraid to let other people know that they're broken inside, that they struggle with an addiction, that their life is not perfect. Because you go to church on Sunday morning, in most churches, everybody's going to have that perfect smile. They're going to have that projected lifestyle, that everything's great. But I can tell you from experience that we all hurt and we're all broken to some degree. And I'm just very excited and proud to be able to say that I'm at a place in my journey where I've learned a few things, and how can I help share that with others? And so writing my book, Jesus and Seltzer, Stories and Meditations on Sobriety and Recovery, opened up a whole new world for me, which again would have never happened had I not got sober. So sobriety for me, even though it's been a long journey, I'm 9 years sober on January 10th, this upcoming January 26th. It's allowed me to do things I would have never dreamed of doing.
When it comes to all these hardships and stuff like that, how are you not mad at God?
That's a good question. I've been mad at God, for sure. Um, you know, I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. I stopped believing that this God I had been told loved me and had a plan for my life. I didn't believe that anymore. In fact, quite the opposite. I believed that he was uncaring. I believed that he owed me a certain lifestyle, and when I didn't get that lifestyle, it was his fault. Um, Not to be graphic, but I would shake my hand at him and give him the middle finger and say, you know what? F off. You did not answer my prayers. My life is complicated, and I don't see you in the complication and in the messiness of it. You know, when my first back fusion surgery failed, the next month we found out my daughter had a disability. We didn't know if she was going to live or die. There wasn't really much literature about her condition. So, as a young married husband and father, struggling with addictions, struggling with chronic pain from a back surgery, and a young daughter who's disabled, and a marriage that eventually fell apart, yeah, I was angry at God. And if I'm to relive some of those experiences, I can very quickly kind of tap into that brokenness where I was angry. And so, um, it takes time. I think that saying time heals all wounds is absolutely correct. But I had to recognize the lie for what the truth is. The truth is God does in fact love me, but he doesn't promise me that life's going to be fair. He doesn't promise me that if you do X, Y, and Z, Jason, I'm going to follow up and give you rewards for making good decisions in life. I don't believe that's how the gospel works. I believe the gospel works by surrendering your life to Jesus and then being available and listening to the Holy Spirit to serve wherever you're at. And so we're mind, body, and spirit. So when I'm working at my store, sometimes my spirit man will tell me, you know what? This customer that's coming in your store, um, they may not be able to afford the equipment they're coming in to buy. So why don't you give them 10% off, Jason? Well, you know what? I had a lady come in who just broke down in tears over 10%. And it was a $30 knee brace. And I was thinking, all of us can afford a $30 knee brace, but this lady she really couldn't. And so that 10% broke her. And I just felt so moved by her honesty and her willingness to be honest that I just bought the thing for her and gave it to her and said, "Listen, this is my gift to you because along the way of my journey, someone imparted gifts to me, and I want to kind of pay it forward, so to speak." So, yeah, there's been years of anger towards the Lord, but there's been years through my surrendering where I've experienced the deep love and the deep grace and the deep mercy that He calls me His beloved son, not by anything I've done, but just because I surrendered my life to Him, and that's tough. It's not an easy thing to do.
Hmm, that's awesome. Well, that's an awesome story, and I'd love to touch more on God and business and different things like that. And I very much love Jesus, and a lot of times some of these conversations end up going gospel, which is awesome, which I think is great. And I think everybody's spiritual in their own sense, whether they, you know, believe in something or not. But I'm totally with you. God is love, and Jesus loves us, and with through the bad things in my life, having to understand that that was not God's intention for those things to happen to me. It's not like God let those things happen or wanted those things happen to me. It's just we're in a broken world, But there's a redemption story, right? The free gift of
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, through faith alone. There's nothing I can possibly do to earn it, and I think that's beautiful. But I wanna talk to you a little bit about going back a little bit. I want to talk to you about your
Yes.
real estate.
Yeah.
I love real estate. You fixing and flipping houses, super fun. Tell me kind of about how that first deal went. You did a lot of deals. If you could go back again and maybe today, I know today's day and age is a totally different market, totally different way to get money, to be even able to flip. Housing prices are kind of high right now. Are you still flipping houses, or are you kind of waiting for the market to shift?
Yeah, I'm waiting for the market to shift, and I'm also waiting just to get the cash flow back to be able to have some discretionary income. I sunk everything I owned in terms of assets into buying this business, this Med Emporium business. Um, but you know what? If I could go back and change something, I would have really tried to stay more cash flow positive and not overextend myself because I was really living on the razor thin line of just about to fail, but almost hitting it out of the park, so to speak. It was these home run deals where, I found a house that I just sat on it for 6 months and did nothing to it and flipped it and made 100 grand. And in that mindset, you're kind of thinking, well, I was at least that a lot of deals are going to be this way. I flip cars as a side hustle right now. Sometimes I make a killing on a car. Sometimes I get a car that's got a bad engine on me and I don't know it until, 2 weeks down the road when I'm got a guy test driving it that the engine is blown. So I would have kept more cash and I wouldn't have been so greedy. And I think cash and greedy go hand in hand. And so I was greedy in buying up as many properties as the banks would allow me to do so without really having a strategic plan in place. And that strategic plan, you've got to allow for the unknown scenarios. So I was kind of loose in my approach and I wasn't very disciplined. And so when I get back into the business, what I've learned is so valuable that I'll be a disciplined investor. I'll be a disciplined person with my assets and my discretionary income. And when I do start to buy a rental property, it's going to need some sweat equity. I'm not going to buy one that's turnkey and pay full price. I might go back and look at the foreclosures or the ones that are being auctioned off at the courthouse steps. Um, you got to buy under value and put some sweat equity into it, and then have that equity in it when you go ahead and rent it out or when you go ahead and flip it. So I think being disciplined is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned since that I would take back with me on any deal I do, regardless.
Hmm. How are you? What are some action steps to be disciplined?
Wow. Um, you can't do it on your own. And so for me, being undisciplined meant I didn't have wiser, smarter people who had gone before me to learn from. I didn't invite people into my circle who could teach me. So while I believed that, you got to learn on your own, you got to, failure's part of the growth, it's also important that you have smarter, more capable people who are seasoned in life, seasoned in their real estate career, seasoned in their finances to kind of really advise you as you go. I don't like that saying, go big or go home, because that assumes that you got to go big. And my best deals have always been the small deals. Um, so you gotta keep your head clear and sharp and surround yourself with smarter people for sure.
How do you find these smart people? What's like the best method you've known?
Well, you got to be humble. You got to know that you don't know all the answers. And so for me, I find these, and they're mostly men. I mean, I know some power couples that I learn from, but they're mostly men that I learn from, and I found these men at church. Um, and these men have shared ideologies. We share a faith. We share a mindset that's about serving. And so as you become authentic and you're not afraid to reveal who you are and you're not afraid to reveal some of your fears or some of your mistakes, we all want to be known in life, but it takes courage to be known. It takes courage to tell somebody, hey, this is really who I am, and I would really appreciate your friendship and your mentorship. Um, because we weren't meant to do life alone. We're meant to be in community. Um, Personally, I mean, you can find community at work. You can find community, in some of your social settings. But for me, community is really found at my local church.
Hmm. How do you go about talking to somebody? I guess you just come up to them and you say you learn about their life, and then you ask, um, "Hey, can we do a deal together? Hey, would you be willing to sit with me once a week and go over something, or ask them what that would look like?"
Yeah, so, you got to at least become acquaintances with these people. You can't just meet somebody on the very first date, so to speak, and vomit all of your life story and then ask for all this stuff in return. It's kind of like, yeah, you kind of got to build a little friendship. You kind of got to test the waters. And is this person uh, a safe person to and a wise person to kind of invite and to share with? Um, just because you find somebody at church doesn't mean he's going to be the best person for you in terms of a mentorship and someone that's going to be able to walk with you. Um, you know, I- I've met people on my traveling career as a project manager that I'm still in touch with today because they just had that it something or that it factor. You just knew when you met them this is somebody that I want to be close to. This is somebody that I respect, and quite honestly, this is somebody that I want to be like. We got to have these heroes in our lives where we're 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 trying to achieve a better version of ourselves. Um, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me, but um, I want to be the best steward of what I've been given on this planet at this stage of my life. And so being a good steward means um, reaching out and uh, making sure that your growth is happening, whether it's business, emotional, spiritual, financial. You always got to be moving in a forward direction.
Hmm. What about this new business that you just acquired? How did you go about? Were you looking for it? Did you just stumble upon it? And then how
Yeah.
did you actually go about acquiring it?
So it was about a year ago, and I was still as my traveling project manager. I knew that I didn't want to do this job any longer, and so I hired a franchise consultant to kind of take my giftings and my likes and who I am as a man at this age and help me find a franchise that aligns with some of my core values. And she came back with, about a dozen good franchises. A lot of it was in the construction background, whether it was windows and gutters or cleaning windows or renovations or like the mini split HVAC systems you can get for some of these older homes that you can't really run ductwork in and put a whole house AC unit in, but you can do a mini split. Um, but she wasn't really finding anything that kind of made me want to get up out of bed and say, yes, this is what I want to do. And so I was thinking about it and I said, well, listen, my daughter's disabled. I think the margins are probably pretty good in that business. Can you find me some franchises in the medical equipment sphere? And she did. And she brought back a franchise that I eventually settled on. And I had been working with this franchise for about 4 weeks, was about ready to sign the NDA and pay the franchise fee. And it was a franchise that did not have a presence here in Hampton Roads, where I live, in like Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Virginia. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to go out to this Med Emporium in Virginia Beach and ask the owners or the manager, whoever's there, if they could give me any advice. So I did, and well, the owner was not in town at the time, so I just left a message and said, listen, whenever the owner gets back, can you just tell him, here's my name and number. I'm interested in getting in this business, and will he share any insights with me? Well, he was out of the country, but when he came back about 10 days later, I got a call and he said, hey, this might be divine, but we're looking to sell one of our locations in about 4 or 5 months. Would you be interested? And that began the journey of getting to know this person, getting to know this business, getting to understand, because it was a family business that they have ran here in this community for over 20 years. And so they were successful at what they did, but they wanted to kind of pull back, get really lean and tight and scale and franchise. So there is a conversation we're having about starting up another location in another city that's close by, but it kind of happened out of nowhere, to be perfectly honest. Some people would say that karma, some people would say, well, you're just lucky, but again, I believe it was a divine opportunity that had I not been actively looking, because we're required to do some legwork in our lives. Had I not been actively looking, I would not have come across this guy and his story by going out and looking for some advice. And the rest is history. Within 4 months, I bought the business.
Mm, that's awesome. So when you bought the business, it's a franchise. So you bought a location, and then now you're looking to expand locations. Is what you're saying?
Yeah. So we're not quite fully franchised yet because there's a lot of red tape and things that they need to do to be legit, so to speak, to be legal to do this. But there is the conversation that yes, we're going to open up another store, um, and whether that's in 26 or maybe 27 really depends on how quickly we scale up the store I'm in now. My revenue is, it's a brick and mortar store, and so I do about 600,000 in gross revenue, but my profit margin is about 63% gross profit margin. So it's making money. Um, but the question is, do I really want to spend time at two different stores, or is it a smarter play for me to maybe scale up this rental scooter business and franchise that out where um, that might be a more lucrative approach to staying in the business and having something that's meaningful and meets my core values, um, where we can really kind of scale up into the seven fingers.
What about the online space? Are you guys only retail or do a little bit online too?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the website we have is shared by our two of our stores, and it's not tied to Shopify, so we can't sell on the website. It's really informational only. So it's a drawback for me right now. So we're hoping in 2026 to kind of isolate the website so that mine is to my store only, and then really try to connect that to a shopping experience so people can buy online. Because my biggest competitor, to be perfectly honest, is Amazon. People like to come into my store, they like to touch and feel, but a lot of them just like to buy online. And so I want to capitalize on that segment of the market where I can drive people to my website, they can buy on my website, I can be the one that manages that relationship. I can be the one that kind of shows up and honors the warranty, and if there's a problem, Jason will come fix it. You're not going to rely on some 800 number or some overseas call center. Customer service is really the name of the game in this kind of service industry where you're serving people's needs. And so if I can marry the two, a good online presence and a good follow up with me and my personal services, uh, I think it's a win-win for sure. But we're just not there yet.
Mm. What's your, you kind of already touched on it. What are some action plans that you have in place right now um, that are going to get you from where you are to maybe doubling in the next couple of years?
Yeah. So you're right. I did touch on it. It's about maintaining your vision. Um, if you're authentically following your vision and you're um, got people in place to help guide you on that journey, you got to have a vision, you got to have a mission statement, you got to have something that when the going gets tough, you're still committed to. And so um, I'm a firm believer that as you pursue your vision, as you continue to go forward, the money, the opportunities, they're going to happen. It's almost like, it's like with the real estate, sweat equity. It doesn't matter if you believe in it or not, it works. So as you do the simple things, whether it's putting the sweat equity in the real estate or you're keeping your vision statement clear and you've got people around you supporting you, um, the rest is going to happen. Um, I think really what I have found is that the ability to get it to happen quickly is not always in your control. So sometimes the market kind of dictates when you'll scale. Sometimes it's with your investors, the banks lending money. I mean, I've got a lender now who sees what we're doing, but he's just not there yet to give me a line of credit to kind of expand the way I would like to. So it's about timing as well. Um, but you got to embrace the whole failure aspect too. I mean, um, if you can't embrace failure, you can't learn and grow from it. And so the mistakes I've made, like I've got a vending machine business right now that um, I thought was going to be very lucrative because I've owned and started a vending machine business before back in the 90s. I owned a ton of bubblegum machines in Walmarts. And it was like printing money. It was an amazing experience, and I sold it as a route and really pocketed some great money. But this go around with my vending machines, we sell all the drinks and snacks. We sell organic food in there, yogurts, sandwiches, etc. It just didn't take off like I thought it would. And um, to sell it, it's just a difficult time in the market right now to sell it. But I did create an opportunity with a guy who we're going to barter. So he's going to build a deck for us at our house. He's going to do some landscaping and some other yard work. And then I'm going to sell him a couple of my machines at a discounted price, but all together, we're going to make this deal where he wants to get into the vending machine business, but he doesn't have a lot of cash to pay retail price. I want to get a deck built on my house, so we're kind of partnering together. And, I might not have had this mindset or this opportunity if I was like, oh man, I didn't do this business right and now it's failing. I don't know what to do. And no, you learn from it. Okay, so I'm not making as much money as I thought I would, but there's still opportunity here for for me to see a benefit and to grow from this. So, um, you know, I'm a big believer in learning from your mistakes and them being very powerful motivators to make better decisions in the future.
That's awesome. Tell me about education. How did you educate yourself? How did you know even how to do a franchise thing? Or you kind of just trial by error, mentors? Do you like reading books?
I'll be honest, it's trial error and it's Google search. So, I'm a big reader. I enjoy reading books. Back in the day, I think the guy's name was Carlton Sheets, but he was like one of the first early online guys in the real estate business where sell you like 25 DVDs and a workbook and teaching you all about how to use other people's money to buy real estate. And I remember I bought that whole system and that whole course, but at the time, it just was too much for me. I didn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to even begin what he was trying to teach. But yeah, I learned from trial and error, and I learned from reading online. To be perfectly honest, I use AI, to really narrow down what it is I'm trying to learn. I don't have the bandwidth to take in a ton of information that's kind of all wide and scattered. I got to be very specific and very narrow with what I'm trying to learn so that I can scale and so that I can be more successful at what I do. And it's not always just about the money. I'm always looking for new mindsets. Um, it seems kind of silly to say this, but it's about the quality of the work you do and not the quantity. And you'd be amazed at well, maybe you wouldn't be amazed. You probably know this as well, that there are house flippers that don't understand quality. They want to do a half job and ask top dollar for it, and you just can't do it. You can't be successful if you're not going to be about doing quality work. And so whether it's flipping houses, whether it's running a durable medical equipment store, the quality of your work, the quality of your craft. I mean, we all are constantly learning how do we do better with our craft as entrepreneurs. And so um, for me, again, it goes back to mentors, it goes back to learning from other people. But um, I think really my strongest lessons have all been learned from trial and error, to be honest.
What's one of the best pieces of advice that you would want to give to another entrepreneur right now? What's kind of on your mind?
Well, I think it would be don't fear the unknown. Um, I think if to be honest, don't fear even that. I mean, that's even just as specific. Don't fear. I mean, you can have a healthy sense of an awareness of the risks and the rewards, but you can't. Personally, I don't think you can't launch a product, an idea, a venture, and carry fear with you. You got to be honest and aware of the risks, but the fear motivator will cause you to be tentative. You're not going to be 100% committed. You're going to be always, it's kind of like having one foot in the door and one foot out the door. You got to be 100% fully committed to your vision, your idea, your product, your concept, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Um, you got to find a way to let go of the fear. Fear is like cancer. It'll just eat away inside you, and it will cause you to question your abilities. I mean, when I borrowed that money from that hard money lender, I had people telling me, Jason, you've never done this before. Aren't you afraid? I'm like, yeah, I am a little bit afraid, but I'm also desperate and I'm hungry. And when you're hungry, um, and for me, that was a hunger to produce and to do something. That was a great motivator to push fear out the side back door there because um, had I had fear, I wouldn't have given all that money to the hard money lender because I would have been afraid that he might run off with it or that I couldn't make my payment when I got the house finished and reappraised. And so I think fear in general is just, you got to find a way to work through that to be
Mm.
successful.
Yeah, and I like Alex Ramonzi says that a lot of time the scariest part is the fear of the unknown, not the known. So when you have something and you write down like what are all the things that could go wrong, makes you less afraid, or less like worrisome. And again, like I think a lot of people just don't even they say no to something because they're afraid something's going to go bad and they haven't even like calculated what the risks would be. And they're like, oh, well, the risks aren't as bad as I originally thought. So
Mhm.
it's worth it, right, for the return. And I think that's a lot of things. A lot of people are just like, oh, that's a great idea. It's too hard, too big of a risk. Well, it's like, well, what is the risk? I think is a good question that not a lot of people are asking, but I like that a lot. Um,
Yeah, I
how can
think
we
I
get
think
in con?
perseverance.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just perseverance is also, I think, what separates the successful from the unsuccessful. If you can't persevere through the hardships, through the difficulties, through the perceived risks or the actual risk, if you can't persevere through failure, you're just not going to be successful. And I think that's for anything in life. If you can't persevere, uh, let's. I'm trying to quit smoking. It's a hard habit to break, but I'm persevering. And so some days it's two steps forward and one step back. Maybe I'll get 3 weeks in and I'll buy a pack and have a few cigarettes and then throw the pack away and get back on to quitting. I got to persevere through these stages of quitting. And I'm going to get there, but it won't happen if I just give up.
Mm, I love that. I love that. One thing I wanted to ask you too was just because again I love Jesus. What's your elevator pitch of the gospel and salvation,
Mm.
and just for anybody that's maybe never heard the gospel before?
Wow, that's a good question. There's a quote that I write in my book. It says, if you want to get to know God better, get to know God's children. And that really spoke to me, and I think it's relevant because you've got to try to search and find out who this God is. And um, you're going to find him in people here that are in your life. And too often we don't love those that are marginalized in society. Uh, we don't give value and respect to those that are different. But the gospel is for all people. It's about God's love for you, and it's about surrendering, and not about works-based righteousness. You can't earn your way to heaven. You can't earn your love from Jesus, the love from the Heavenly Father. My kids can't earn my love. I'm going to shower them with my love because I love them. They're my kids. And so the gospel for me is it's not about works-based righteousness. It's not about performance. It's not about doing the right thing. It's really a personal relationship that's built on surrender and trust. Um, I trust that God's got a plan for my life. I trust that all things work together for good for those that are called according to his purposes. My businesses might fail, and I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm going to make every effort to make them successful, but it just means that God's part of the journey, and there's something else that's better for me. I've learned in this journey that his ways are really the best ways. I can't always understand his ways, but I trust him. I trust that he knows what's best for me and my family. And that's a great source of comfort when you're staring down a dwindling checking account, or you're looking at your revenue and it's down from last month, or whatever it is that you're going on in life. You got to have something that anchors you. And for me, that's my faith. You know, I don't understand how people make life work without a set of beliefs like what the gospel teaches us, because I guess that's why there's so many addictions, because people turn to other substances when things aren't going right. But man, the amount of joy and peace I get from my spiritual walk, I want everybody to know that and experience that. So, um, whereas in the past I wasn't very vocal about my faith, I've got a prayer board in my store where people can come in and say, see it says free prayers here. And I put their name on my board, and I had a gentleman come in yesterday, and he's losing his sense of touch in his hands, and he's starting to trip and fall down. He's got to go see a neurologist, and he's afraid. And he came to the store just seeing what kind of products do I might have to start to think about buying as he has mobility issues. And so, just to be available in that short little moment with that gentleman was life-giving and life-affirming, and blessed me more than it probably blessed him, to be perfectly honest. So, I want people to really understand that God is for them, has a plan for them, and it may not look like the plan that they want, but you got to trust in that. You got to trust in his plan for your life.
Mm. And how can we get in contact with you? How can we hear more about you? Give us some plugs.
Yeah, so my website's jasonumidi.com. It's my full name, JASONUMIDI.com. My book is on there, my coaching. I've done press for my book, so I've done TV and radio. I've got my MedEmp, which is www.medemp.com, which is my store. Gives you an idea of what I sell. But I'll be perfectly honest, people can shoot me an email at jasonumidi@gmail. I'm available, and I'm open to walking with people in different stages of their life. And I'm open and available for people to get to know the gospel and get to know who Jesus is, and those that want to find recovery and need a recovery coach. I'm at that stage in my life where it's all about service to other people. And so, shoot me an email, get on my website, order my book. Volume 2 is coming out this year. I've got a nonprofit, so people can donate if they want to help get the recovery message out to guys and women who are in jail, who are in the group homes, who are in recovery. I donate my books to those individuals. And so that's always another way to help support the mission and the ministry of this recovery work that I'm so 100% behind and proud to be a part of, because your addictions, your life that you used to live, it doesn't disqualify you from this new life. If you're looking for sobriety, if you're looking to live a sober lifestyle, you're not disqualified from the future that God has for you just because your background is a little bit messy like mine. So I want to extend hope to each and every one of you who are listening, and just reach out and don't be afraid.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is a $100 million podcast. Our $100 million guest today is Jason. All the links are going to be in the description for that. If you guys found value in this content, please subscribe, like, and follow, and share those with somebody that is going to need to hear it. And also put any questions and stuff in the comment section, and I will be sure to answer that. All right, have a good one.